Okay, good afternoon. My name is Evan Weiner. My background is radio and TV and also magazines and newspapers. And I've interviewed this guy, Bill Clinton. In 2007, I was at the George H.W. Bush Presidential Museum now. It was just the George Bush Museum when I was there. State Department sent me on a talk at the Bush Library in College Station, Texas back in 2007, and you paid for it. Your taxpayers' dollars outwork me. You got to see me down there. Actually, only 20 people got to see me down there. It was a special crowd that was hand-selected. There were 3 Venezuelans, 3 Russians, 3 Nigerians, 3 Indonesians. There was 3 Turks, 1 Canadian, and 4 Americans, and that's it. Those were the only 20 people who could see me talk, but you paid for it. Anyway, so Bill Clinton, that's not because the president becomes the U.S. president, and here he is with George Bush. By the way, you might not know this, but Clinton and Bush had a father-son relationship in their lives. They were very close. Not when they ran against one another, but afterwards they became very close. The World Trade Center bombing, this is the 1993 bombing. The North American Free Trade Agreement, which we've been hearing about since January 20th, between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, was signed in 1993. As far as the military, this is Gay Pride Month. And Bill Clinton came up with the don't ask, don't tell. You're not supposed to ask anybody their sexual orientations or orientation, nor should you tell you or your superior officer what your orientation is. The Waco siege, Branch Davidian standoff in Waco, Texas, that lasted about 7 weeks. Black Hawk Down. Some of you might have seen the movie Black Hawk Down. That is all about Somalia. Israel and Palestine make peace? Did they? That's Rabin, Clinton, and Yasser Arafat. And 1993, there was supposed to be some sort of peace. The Russian constitutional crisis, Boris Yeltsin, who was the president of Russia, basically overthrew his government to stay in power. The drug lord Pablo Escobar is killed, and there were a number of books and movies about him. Jurassic Park is released. It was a big year for Steven Spielberg. He had this movie and he had this movie, Schindler's List. They both came out in 1993. Anybody see either one of those movies back then? Schindler's List. Rupert Murdoch bets big on the National Football League. He has a struggling network going nowhere, and he decides he's going to overpay for the National Football League in an effort to build a network, a television network in the United States. This is Michael Jordan. You've heard of Michael Jordan, right? Basketball player. He has hair. He has hair. It's before he shaved his head. That's him and my father-in-law. Michael Jordan retired in 1993. There was a National Hockey League team named after a movie, the Mighty Ducks, that came into existence. The tennis player Monica Seles was stabbed during a match. Gossip, gossip, gossip. You need your gossip. The king of pop and the queen of afternoon crap TV. Oprah Winfrey and Michael Jackson. And a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Scott Levine, we were working around that time, was talking about these afternoon TV shows. And he was on the Geraldo Rivera show, Jerry Rivers show, when Geraldo had to get when his nose was allegedly busted by a chair during a fight. And Scott said, oh, it was all staged. They told me to stand right there. There was tape on the floor. He said, I was the sound guy. I was holding it up, and they said exactly where to go because the fight was staged for other reasons. Bill Clinton wins. 1992, he wins the presidential election. He defeats George H.W. Bush and Ross Perot. On November 3rd, 1992, Bill Clinton won the election handedly over the incumbent George Bush by a margin in the Electoral College, 370 and 168. But Clinton didn't get a plurality. He only got, or actually a majority of the vote. He got a plurality of 43% of the vote. Bush only 37. The third party candidate, Ross Perot, received no electoral votes, but he won 19% of the popular vote, which was an astounding amount of votes for a independent candidate. Why did Clinton win? Well, it was this simple. It's the economy, stupid. That's basically it. Talked about the economy. I actually interviewed Clinton on the campaign trail in 1992, and I was talking to him about gays in the military. No, it wasn't gays. Yeah, it was gays in the military that we were talking about on the campaign trail. Anyway, James Carville, who was the consultant to Clinton, came up with the slogan, and he kept on message. In 1992, the United States was hit by a recession. During the three-country negotiations, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was proposed during 1992, was heavily criticized by the Reform Party candidate Ross Perot. Remember Ross Perot running back then? It's always on Larry King. And Larry King, who is a great interviewer for this reason, didn't know what he was doing. He just let the guy talk, and he just listened and asked a couple of questions. But that was the whole thing about Larry King. He was always criticized, throwing softball questions. It's because he was not prepared, and I should know. My friends Todd and Chris Castleberry were his producers. Anyway, he was always on Larry King, and he argued that if NAFTA was passed, Americans would hear a great sucking sound of American companies fleeing the United States from Mexico, where employees would be paid less and without benefits. Actually, he was right about that. The manufacturing went from the north to the south, then to Mexico, and then overseas. The Bush administration concluded negotiations with Canada and Mexico. Each submitted the agreement for ratification in their respective capitals, Mexico City, Ottawa, and Washington, in December 1992. So Bill Clinton has a new job. He's president of the United States, and Hillary Clinton is there as he takes the oath of office. He inherited a struggling economy with high deficits and unemployment. And he would have a lot of challenges that first year, an extraordinary amount of challenges. He would have to navigate the relationship with Russia. Russia is this new sort of kind of looking for democracy after the Soviet Union fell in 1991, so things are a bit jittery in Russia. And also there was nuclear weapons, or there were nuclear weapons in the former Soviet republics, and there was that rapid decline of the Russian economy. He also had to tackle foreign policy issues in Africa, particularly in Somalia and Rwanda, where conflicts and humanitarian crises were escalating. And he had a problem with Serbia. Starting in April 1992, Serbia set out to ethnically cleanse Bosnian territory by systematically removing all Bosnian Muslims. But his first real challenge was the bombing of the World Trade Center, which you may or may not remember from 32 years ago. But there it is, the World Trade Center. And this was the initial bombing. And for some reason, the terrorists decided to go after the World Trade Center, thinking that it was the center of trade, where basically it was mainly offices, government offices, because they couldn't fill the building. They never could fill the building until then. On February 26th, a van loaded with 1,200 pounds worth of nitrogen bomb headed for downtown Manhattan. The destination was the World Trade Center. The mission, destroy the Twin Towers. A group of terrorists led by Razmi Youssef drove their bomb-filled vehicle into a public parking garage below the towers. They parked on the B2 level of the garage, lit the bomb's fuse, escaped in a getaway car. The explosion left a hole 150 feet wide and several stories deep underneath the North Tower. People on the top floors of the towers and in surrounding buildings could feel the force of the explosion. While the terrorist mission was to destroy the towers, and that failed, 6 people were killed in the attack and thousands were injured. So this is the scene outside of the World Trade Center back in February 1993. It wasn't the first terrorist attack. People have theorized that the killing of Meir Kahane, the rabbi, who was very anti-Palestinian, the assassination was the first attack by Palestinian terrorists or Islamic terrorists in the United States. Within minutes of the bombing, the Joint Terrorism Task Force investigators suspected the act of terrorism. 2 days after the attack, investigators recovered several vehicle fragments from the parking garage of the World Trade Center. Unlike the other fragments they found, these pieces indicated they were from a vehicle that had exploded outward. 2 of these pieces included a vehicle identification number, which is a unique code given to all cars and trucks sold in the United States. That's where they figured out what this car was. The vehicle was a Ryder van. It was traced by the FBI to a rental agency in Jersey City, New Jersey, and this bit of information led investigators to the name of the man who rented the van, Mohammed Salami. Seeking a refund, he wanted his money back. Wanted his $400 back because something happened to his van. He didn't know what happened to it, but he didn't have it. So he decided, you know what? It's stolen. Somebody stole my vehicle. I want my money back. That was February 26th. Working with the rental office personnel, Salomon was arrested on March the 4th. And these are the people who were suspected of bombing the World Trade Center back in February 1993. Yusuf's plan was that the North Tower would fall onto the South Tower, collapsing them both. The tower did not explode, but the garage was severely damaged in the explosion. Had the van been parked closer to the World Trade Center's poured concrete foundations, Yusuf's plan might have succeeded. But he fled. He went to Pakistan, quickly to Pakistan, right after the bombing. 4 of the plotters were arrested. Their motives? Islamic extremism, backlash against American foreign policy, and United States support for Israel. Now, the North America Free Trade Agreement, and that was actually a George Bush thing, that he got Brian Mulroney there. Brian Mulroney was the Canadian Prime Minister, and I got to interview him as well. I got to speak at Bush's library and interviewed Mulroney and the Mexican president there. December 8th, the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, was signed into law by President Bill Clinton. It took about a year to do it. NAFTA, a trade pact between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, virtually eliminated all tariffs and trade restrictions between the 3 nations. The movement for free trade in North America begun as a Republican initiative. The idea, this is the Ronald Reagan Museum in Santa Barbara, California. Reagan spent a lot of time in Santa Barbara on his ranch, and there is Gipper, and there's me underneath. I interviewed Reagan in 1980, January of 1980. He was up in Bear Mountain, New York, and it was me and 6 other people there. This was before he caught fire in 1980 and got the Republican nomination. So I did interview Reagan in 1980. I was 23 years old when I interviewed Reagan. It was Ronald Reagan who pushed for the idea of the North American Free Trade Zone. Reagan made the idea part of his 1980 presidential campaign after signing the Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement in 1988. The administrations of the United States President George Bush, the Mexican President Carlos Salinas de Gortari, and the Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, they agreed to negotiate what became NAFTA. Canada, Ottawa. The earlier United States-Canada Free Trade Agreement had been controversial and divisive in Canada, and it was featured as an issue in the 1988 Canadian election. In that election, more Canadians voted for anti-free trade parties, the Liberals and the New Democrats, but the split of votes between the two parties meant that the pro-trade Progressive Conservatives, or the PCs, came out of the election with the most seats, and they took power. Mulroney and the PCs had a parliamentary majority and easily passed the 1987 Canada-US FTA and the NAFTA bills. Mulroney was replaced as conservative leader and Prime Minister by Kim Campbell. She was the first woman ever to be the Prime Minister of Canada, and she led the PC party into the 1993 election, where they were decimated by the Liberal Party under Jean Chrétien, who campaigned on the promise to renegotiate or abrogate NAFTA. Chrétien was still alive, he's 93 years old, and talking today about this agreement and how it's impacted what's going on in 2025. Subsequently negotiated two supplemental agreements with Bush, who worked to fast-track the signing prior to the end of his term on January 20th, 1993. Bush ran out of time. His term ended and had to pass the required ratification and signing of the implementation to Bill Clinton. Washington, D.C. Washington's broken there. See, in that picture, all scaffolding on the Capitol building. Washington's broken. Anyway, before sending it to the United States Senate, Clinton added two side agreements, the North American Agreement on Labor Cooperation and the North American Agreement on Environmental Cooperation to protect workers and the environment, and also to allay the fears of many House members. The U.S. required its partners to adhere to environmental practices and regulations similar to its own. The United States House of Representatives passed the North American Free Trade Agreement Implementation Act on November 17, 234 to 200. The bill passed the Senate November 20th. Clinton stated that NAFTA means jobs, American jobs, and good-paying American jobs. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't support this agreement. NAFTA replaced the previous Canadian-US FTA. What it did create was basically a symmetry between Americans and Canadians in trade. That's what it basically did. Meanwhile, in Mexico, there's the Mexican flag. NAFTA was approved by the Mexican Senate on November 22nd and was published in the official Gazette of the Federation on December 8th. NAFTA would go into effect on January 1st, 1994. The agreement brought the immediate eliminations of, oh, look at that word, tariffs. Gee, that's a word is there. I wonder what that means. Oh, that means taxes. That means taxes. That means that whether you're in Canada, Mexico, or the United States, tariffs meant you pay taxes, not the corporations, not the companies. Elimination of tariffs on more than one-half of Mexico's exports to the United States and more than one-third of U.S. exports to Mexico. Within 10 years of the implementation of the agreement, all U.S. and Mexico tariffs would be eliminated, except for some U.S. agricultural exports to Mexico to be phased out, say by the year 2009. Most U.S.-Canada trade was already duty-free. NAFTA also sought to eliminate non-tariff trade barriers and to protect intellectual properties on traded products. Well, we're still talking about NAFTA in 2025 and tariffs. And tariffs on steel may be 50% by now or may not be. Don't ask, don't tell. This is a gay guy holding up the sign, let us serve openly. Let us serve. Let us serve. We're Americans too. We can serve. The phrase, don't ask, don't tell, was coined after Bill Clinton signed a law that went into place on October 1st. The law dealt with the service of homosexuals in the military. It directed military personnel, don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue, don't harass. The policy theoretically lifted a ban on homosexual service that had been instituted during World War II. Waco siege. Government invades a compound in Waco, Texas, led by David Koresh. The Branch Davidians, that was his group. They were founded in 1955 as an offshoot of a former religious community following the death of its leader. Believing that the group was illegally stockpiling weapons, the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, AFT, obtained both an arrest warrant for the leader, David Koresh, and a search warrant for the Branch Davidian compound. It was his belief, Koresh's belief, that God had appointed him to create a new house of David and to procreate with women within his religious group. Reports of Koresh's claim of any women within the group led to allegations of statutory rape. He had fathered dozens of children to build his army of God, and it was alleged that some of his brides were as young as 12 years old. Along with the accusations of child abuse, the sect was also suspecting of stockpiling illegal weapons. That is the Waco siege. You can see the ATF guys looking right at the place, all ready to shoot if need be. On February 28th, more than 70 ATF agents raided the complex. Gunfire erupted, though it's uncertain who fired first, and during the 2-hour battle, 4 federal agents were killed and more than a dozen injured. In addition, 6 Davidians reportedly died. Nearly 900 law enforcement officers subsequently descended the compound, including the FBI hostage negotiating team. During phone calls, Koresh engaged in Bible babble, threatened violence, though he stated that neither he nor his followers were suicidal. Partly in exchange for various supplies, including milk that was delivered in cartons with listening devices, Koresh allowed more than 30 of his followers to leave. However, it was thought that more than 100 remained inside. And that is David Koresh. The siege was not expected to last so long as March 1st. They thought it would be done within a couple days. 10 children were released from the compound following negotiations with the FBI. On March 2nd, Koresh demanded a video message be played on the Christian Broadcasting Network before his surrender, but he goes back on his word. On March 7th, Koresh announced that he was the father of all remaining children within the compound, and they would not be released. Several times through the siege, the electricity of the compound was shut off by the FBI. 8 women and 2 men were released from the compound by the end of March, and the Davidians promised to surrender after they observed Passover. The FBI anticipated Koresh reneging on this deal and ordered a tear gas attack on the compound on April the 19th, and that erupted into something else that you can see. As the gas hit the compound, gunfire was heard from within and several fires broke out. The compound was razed to the ground, and David Koresh, along with many of his followers, were confirmed dead. 66 people died. A large concentration of bodies, weapons, and ammunition was found in the bunker storage room. 9 survivors of the Branch Davidians were charged with firearm offenses and aiding and abetting the voluntary manslaughter of federal agents on August 3rd. The Oslo Accord. Well, you know, there's been a war between Israel and Gaza since October 7th, 2022. Well, this accord, when it was signed in 1993, was supposed to end all the hostilities between the Palestinians and the Israelis. It didn't. September 13th, the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, negotiator Mahmoud Abbas signed the Declaration of Principles on interim self-government arrangements, commonly referred to as the Oslo Accord, at the White House. Israel accepted the PLO as the representative of the Palestinians, And the PLO renounced terrorism and recognized Israel's right to exist in peace. Both sides agreed Palestinian Authority would be established and assume governing responsibilities in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip between then and 1998. U.S. officials were briefed on secret negotiations that the Israelis and Palestinians had begun in Oslo, Norway, December 2nd, 1992, but made little effort to get involved. Meanwhile, this becomes a movie eventually, Black Hawk Down. Clinton has problems in Somalia, big problems in Somalia. The United States military forces arrived in war-torn Somalia in 1992 on a humanitarian mission to get food to starving people in a city where resources were controlled by various warlords. One of those warlords had directed forces that conducted attacks on United Nations allies, killing dozens and bombing in August 1993 that killed 4 U.S. military police officers. The Battle of Mogadishu is also known as Black Hawk Down. It's part of Operation Gothic Serpent. On October 3rd, the Special Operations Unit of the U.S. Army Ranger and Delta Force troops headed for the center of Mogadishu, Somalia, to capture 3 rebel leaders. The mission was thought to be relatively straightforward, but when 2 U.S. Black Hawk helicopters were shot down, the mission took a disastrous turn for the worse. By the time the sun set over Somalia the next day, a total of 18 Americans were killed, another 73 wounded. After the battle, dead U.S. troops were dragged through the streets by enraged Somalis, an act that was broadcast on American television to public outcry. Meanwhile, another problem, Boris Yeltsin. My friend, the late Shelley Saltman, I know Shelley's listening to me now. The late Shelley, he was beaten up by Evel Knievel. He also played tennis with this guy, Boris Yeltsin. He was also, Robert F. Kennedy wrote his last speech on June 5th, 1968 at Shelley's desk. Yeah, Shelley, I remember you. We'll see you in 15 years or so. Anyway, the Russian constitutional crisis. The Russian president, Boris Yeltsin, had disbanded the parliament, the Supreme Soviet on September 21st and called new elections. But under the leadership of Yeltsin's chief rivals, the Supreme Soviet Speaker Ruslan Kastabulatov and the Vice President Alexander Ruskov, rebel lawmakers barricaded themselves in Moscow's White House, the building housing parliament, and voted to impeach and vowed to impeach Yeltsin. On October 3rd, the Russian President Yeltsin ordered tanks and airborne troops to shell and storm the White House. Parliamenters. The Russian Parliament, the Supreme Soviet building, to suppress the opposition, trying to impeach him and remove him. And there's the bombing. They did a good job bombing that place. Under a decree following a state of emergency that Yeltsin imposed the National Salvation Front, the Russian Communist Party, United Front Workers, and the Union of Officers were banned, while Pravda, the former organ, the newspaper of the Soviet Communist Party, and other newspapers were told to cease publishing. Official figures put the death toll of the crisis at 187, but it is thought that maybe up to 2,000 died. The constitutional crisis with Yeltsin, who had a little problem with alcohol as well. On October 12th, Yeltsin decreed that both houses of parliament would be elected in December. On October 15th, he ordered that a popular referendum be held in December on the new constitution. Ruskov and Kalabutalov were charged on October 15th with organizing mass disorders and were in prison. Both would later receive pardons. On December 12th, Yeltsin did get his new constitution, creating a strong presidency and giving the president sweeping powers to issue decrees. But the parliament elected on the same day delivered a stunning rebuke to his neoliberal economic program. Czechoslovakia is no more. Anybody with roots from Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic or Slovakia in here?
No.
Nope. No more. They're gone. They're gone. Took a couple years, but they're gone. The declaration on the sovereignty of the Slovak Republic was approved by the Slovak National Council on July 17, 1992, ended with the following words. With this declaration, the Slovak National Council declares the sovereignty of the Slovak Republic as basis of the sovereign state of the Slovak nation. Same day, the Czechoslovakian President Waco announced that he was stepping down. Following 2 years of unsuccessful negotiations on the future name and form of Czechoslovakia, the division of the shared state began to take shape. In Brno, which is now part of the Czech Republic, on October 26, 1992. The Czech leader, Václav Klaus, and the Soviet leader, Vladimir Myslár, confirmed an agreement on the dissolution of the state in writing. In November, the federal legislature would divide Czechoslovakia, having drafted separate constitutions in two countries, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Czechoslovakia was out of business on December 31st, 1992. And there's a picture of the new countries, Czech Republic and Slovakia, and they break apart. The country of Czechoslovakia was dissolved at the inauguration of the new year, replaced by the separate Czech and Slovak states after 74 years of union. Czechoslovakia broke peacefully into the two separate states, 10.3 million Czechs, 5.3 million Slovaks. It was the first time in the 1,000-year history of the Slovak nation that it had achieved true independence. The Czech Republic and Slovakia established diplomatic relations on January 1st. The Czech Republic was established as an embassy or the Czech Republic established an embassy in Bratislava and Slovakia established its Czech Republic embassy in Prague. One of my grandmothers came from Prague. Pablo Escobar was killed. Somehow these guys become beloved figures, like John Gotti and Escobar, and Alphonse Capone. They're all beloved figures, even though they're really bad people. Really, really bad people. But they become folk heroes of a sort. He was a Colombian drug lord. He was the head of the Medellin cartel who trafficked drugs, mainly cocaine, through the 1980s and 1990s. It was thought that he controlled 80% of the cocaine trafficked to the United States. Though responsible for the killing of thousands of people, his name could be found on Forbes magazine's annual list of billionaires from 1997 to 1993. So he's living the good life. He's a billionaire. And that's when billionaire meant with something in 1993. Following much violence, Escobar's power within Colombia began to diminish, and in June 1991, he surrendered to the Colombian government, but he was put in a luxury prison that he built. In 1992, when the government attempted to remove Escobar from his luxurious surroundings and handpicked guards, he also picked his guards out. How'd you like to go to prison, live in luxury, and have the people protecting you or watching you? You picked. Anyway, he escaped La Catrao, and that sparked a 16-month manhunt. Escobar is killed finally. He's killed. He's located by police on December 2nd, and he and his bodyguard were shot dead as they tried to escape by running across the rooftops of buildings. Despite being known as the most violent criminal of all time, thanks to his Robin Hood persona, he's going to rob from the rich, give to the poor, and the funding of charity projects within Medellin, more than 25,000 people attended his funeral. Again, these people become folk heroes. Anybody see Jurassic Park with their children or grandchildren? Steven Spielberg, Jurassic Park. It's an American science fiction action film directed by Steven Spielberg. The movie was set on the fictional island of Isla Nublar near Costa Rica. where wealthy businessman John Hammond Attenborough and a team of genetic scientists have created a wild park of de-extinct dinosaurs. For Jurassic Park, he sought to go beyond the simple monster movie. The movie and the idea was not to make the monsters any less threatening, but rather to keep them from doing much monster shtick. I guess like Godzilla go, ah! Every Godzilla, Chinese Godzilla movies are great. You know who was in one of the Godzilla movies? Remember Perry Mason, Raymond Burr? He was in one of those movies. Jurassic Park premiered in Washington, D.C. on June 9th in support of two children's charities. The film had previews on 1,412 screens, starting at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time on June the 10th, and officially opened on Friday, June the 11th, in 2,404 theater locations and an estimated 3,400 screens. It would go on to become the highest-grossing film released worldwide up to that time, replacing Spielberg's 1982 movie, E.T. Remember E.T.? Well, he beat E.T. Meanwhile, he does another movie. It was called Schindler's List, and this was personal to him. He was born in 1946, but he had relatives who were killed during the Holocaust, so this movie becomes really personal, and initially he picks up the rights to it and he can't do it. It's just too harrowing for him. Schindler's Ark, that was the book, and it becomes a movie. And it was done by the Australian novelist Thomas Kennerley, who tells the story of Oskar Schindler, a member of the Nazi Party, who becomes an unlikely hero by saving the lives of 1,200 Jews during the Holocaust. It follows actual people and events with fictional dialogue and scenes added by the author. The United States edition of the book was entitled Schindler's List and was later reissued in the Commonwealth countries, the English Commonwealth countries, under the same name as well. The book becomes an American film, directed and produced by Spielberg, written by Stephen Zalian, and it becomes the movie. Rupert Murdoch and Fox. Fox actually started back in 1985, 86. There was The Late Show with Joan Rivers. That was a soft launch, and the show bombed out. And they were struggling to gain acceptance in the American TV community. After all, there were only 3 networks between 1955, major networks, between 1955 and 1994-95. ABC, CBS, and NBC. Of course, you had PBS, but that was educational. This is Married with Children. That was one of the big hits on Fox, along with The Simpsons. Basically those two. There was Gary Shandling show, Tracy Ullman show, but most of their shows didn't get viewers. Why didn't they get viewers? Because they were on very weak stations. So Rupert Murdoch decides he's going to roll the dice and get the National Football League, the big whale out there. He gives them a lot of money, hoping to build, and this is technically not the TV network, it's a syndication service, but for the purposes of this talk, I'll just keep it as a TV network. December 17th, National Football League announced that they had taken Rupert Murdoch's Fox $1.858 billion bid, $1,580 million for National Football Conference games. Murdoch's got the rights starting in 1994. The NFL also awarded NBC and ABC other games, leaving CBS out in the cold. CBS had been the rights holder. Murdoch's group of stations, again, technically not a network, had some shows that attracted some audience. Simpsons, anybody watch The Simpsons with your kids or grandkids? You never did? The Simpsons? It used to be good. It's still on. It's the longest running non-news television show in American history. The longest running show in American history is Meet the Press, which started November 6, 1947. So they had The Simpsons and Married with Children, but lag behind ABC, CBS, and NBC in the ratings. Getting the NFL rights meant Murdoch's Fox joined the big leagues. How many of you here know who Michael Jordan is? Anybody who doesn't know who Michael Jordan is here? Everybody knows the great basketball player and one of the great TV pitchmen, whether it would be Gatorade, must be the shoes, the Nike shoes, Gatorade, and other things that he did. Well, he retired. And at that point in my life, I was covering sports. And I was covering New York Knicks games, and there were all kind of rumors about this guy and his gambling problem, which I'll get into in a minute or two. On October 6th, the National Basketball Association Chicago Bulls player Michael Jordan announced his retirement after leading the team to 3 consecutive NBA championships. The announcement came after Jordan came as a surprise. After Jordan had just won the 1993 NBA Finals against the Phoenix Suns. Jordan stated that he had reached the pinnacle of his career, didn't have anything else to prove. He also mentioned the recent death of his father, who was killed in North Carolina, and had a significant impact on his decision. He also wanted to spend time with his family. As a reporter, and I hear he wanted to spend time with his family, and I said, oh yeah, something is up. Something is more than just meets the eye. Rumors started that the NBA Commissioner David Stern suspended Jordan for gambling, and Jordan simply retired. Jordan was only 30 years old at the time. He was still in the prime of his career. He was widely considered the greatest player in the world at that time. How many of you ever saw the Mighty Ducks movie with your kids or grandkids? Way back when. Yeah. This particular movie gives birth to a National Hockey League franchise. In December 1992, the National Hockey League expanded to 2 markets, Miami and Anaheim, California. The Walt Disney Company purchased a franchise that would play in Anaheim near Disneyland. On March 1st, the team was named the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, or the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, after the 1992 Disney movie, The Mighty Ducks. The film featured a group of misfit kids who turned their losing hockey team into a winning team. The Walt Disney Company president, Michael Eisner, who ended up owning Topps baseball cards eventually, said that the film's success served as our marketing research. That was it. The movie made money, let's buy a hockey team, and he did. The team's first game was on October 8th, and Anaheim lost to Detroit 7-2. This was a problem. The security broke down at a tennis match. This is Monica Seles, and she was stabbed. On April 30th, the world's #1 tennis player, women's tennis player, Monica Seles, leads the match against Magdalena Malieva during a quarterfinal at the WTA Hamburg, Germany. During a break, a spectator, Gunter Parshik, runs onto the court and stabs Seles in the back. She's rushed to the hospital and recovers from her injuries. He is arrested and eventually received 2 years for aggravated assault. Parshik said in the court that he wanted to hurt Seles so much that she couldn't play tennis for a long time.
Why?
That's a good question. Why? It's only a game, and it has no impact on your life other than an enjoyment. It's so bad today with social media that players have to hire guards around their houses because of the threats on social media. There was no social media in those days. You know, it's really become awful. Well, the king of pop and the queen of afternoon TV meet. Yep, it's Oprah Winfrey and Michael Jackson. Now, I'm going to tell you something you're not supposed to know, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. There's a woman I know by the name of Anna Muskrat, and she was on the Jenny Jones show. And I am on the cruise ship, and I'm giving talks on the cruise ship, and she's the other person who's giving talks. And since we're kind of in the same business, I sat and listened to her talk. She was a producer of the Jenny Jones show, which is sort of like Oprah Winfrey. And she was giving talks, which astounded me. And I said, Heather, you're going to kill your career. Absolutely kill your career by telling the dirty secrets of what's going on. Like I told you about this guy, Scott Levine, that I knew. And how there was a fight staged on the Geraldo show, or as I call him, Jerry Rivers, and everybody else calls Geraldo Rivera Jerry Rivers. Yeah, he's Puerto Rican. His brother's named Craig. And have you ever heard of a Puerto Rican named Craig? That's his name. So anyway, Geraldo or Jerry Rivers has a rather interesting history. But, and my friend Steve North worked for him as his ghostwriter for his books. Anyway, these shows are staged. And Scott had to go to a certain point with his sound equipment and watch somebody smack Jerry Rivers over the face with a chair because Jerry Rivers needed to get some procedure done on his nose and he was going to miss some time, so why not hit him across the face so he could do whatever he had to do with the doctor. Jenny Jones, some of these people, particularly on the judges' shows, are liquored up. And they may not receive the money that they're supposed to get on these shows because the producers say, oh, we ran out of money, but take this show. Who are you going to do? You can sue them? You're not going to sue them. So anyway, so that's the background on these type of shows. And since I work on these type of shows, I can tell you, because I don't have to worry about my future. Anyway, Her Royal Highness of afternoon TV filler, Oprah Winfrey, snagged the Royal Highness of popular music, Michael Jackson, for a scintillating less than 60-minute interview on February 10th. Oprah's show was the Oprah Winfrey Show and wasn't too much different from similar shows which she pulled in viewers. Michael Jackson was the hottest act in show business and just performed at the National Football League's Super Bowl halftime show. Jackson denied multiple tabloid rumors surrounding his personal life. Let me give you something else about those tabloid, the Inquirer, the Globe, all that. It's people working on the show, or maybe even the show host herself or himself, that feed these tidbits to these gossip rags. Because if you're the gossip rag, you'll get more publicity. That's how that works. Anyway, including that he bought the bones of the Elephant Man. Remember the Elephant Man? And slept in a hyperbaric chamber. When asked about Winfrey about his changing appearances and rumors that he had undergone cosmetic surgery, Jackson stated that the only operation he received was a nose job, but that he was also becoming uncomfortable with his appearance and was afraid to look at himself in mirrors. When asked this is a great question. This guy at this point, let's see, how old would he be? He would be probably around 30, probably more. When asked, think of this, he's asked by Oprah Winfrey, are you a virgin? Why? He refused to answer, insisted that you can call me an old-fashioned if you wanted, but to me that's very personal. Okay? Oprah pulled out all the stops. She even got Elizabeth Taylor to pop on because she was friends with Michael Jackson. But the show got 62 million viewers. It worked. It was also during February Sweeps month. Now, February Sweeps works like this. The network that gets the most TV viewers can raise their rates over the past month for TV advertising. You're number one, you can raise your rates. In August, the Los Angeles Times reported that the Los Angeles Police Department started investigating Jackson on allegations that he possibly molested 4 children, including a 13-year-old boy. So what's the legacy from this year? Well, that's a long time ago. He's going to be 40 years old in a couple of weeks, and that's my son in front of the World Trade Center. In March 1994, Mohammed Salami, Nidrin Ayed, Mahmoud Abu-Lima, and Ahmed Ajak were each convicted in the World Trade Center bombing. In May 1994, they were sentenced to 240 years in prison. In the years that followed, they received several sentencing reductions, and they could walk free when they're in their 90s or even in their 100s. Eventually, Razem Youssef was captured on November 12, 1997. He was found guilty of masterminding the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and was sentenced to life in prison. On September 1st, 2001, terrorists destroyed 2 World Trade Center towers, the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Well, that's Donald Trump earlier this year talking about NAFTA and talking about trade and talking about tariffs and talking about deficits and all of that. After Donald Trump took office in January 2017, he sought to replace NAFTA with a new agreement, beginning negotiations with Canada and Mexico. In September 2018, the United States, Mexico, and Canada reached an agreement to replace NAFTA with the United States-Mexico-Canadian agreement called USMCA, and all 3 countries ratified it by March of 2020. NAFTA remained in force until USMCA was implemented. In April 2020, Canada and Mexico notified the United States that we're ready to implement the agreement. The USMCA took effect on July 1st, 2020, replacing NAFTA. Trump attempted to rip up his 2018 deal when he returned to office in 2025 after winning the 2024 presidential election and imposed tariffs on Mexico. That's when you paid for me to speak on your behalf at the George Bush Presidential Library. This is August of 2007, and your taxpayer dollars at work. George H.W. Bush is probably remembered culturally for claiming he would not raise taxes. Peggy Noonan wrote the words that Bush used as part of his speech. Read my lips, no new taxes. With a $2.8 trillion deficit and a collapsing savings and loans industry, George H.W. Bush had to balance the budget and stabilize the economy after pledging not to raise taxes. He was criticized for his inability to repair the U.S. economic status. He had more success with his foreign policy than his domestic policy. Bush reached out to allies to restore the legitimate Kuwaiti government after Saddam Hussein sent Iraqi troops to invade that country. Ultimately, Bush sent 425,000 troops overseas during Operation Desert Storm, January 1991. The Americans with Disabilities Act was signed in 1990 to protect those with disabilities against workplace discrimination. The Clean Air Act's amendment of 1990 aimed to decrease urban smog and acid rain. Don't ask, don't tell. Don't ask, don't tell. Remained the United States military policy into the 21st century. In December 2010, both the House of Representatives and the Senate voted to repeal the policy, and President Barack Obama signed the legislation on December 22nd. The policy officially ended on September 20th, 2011. In 2010, 2 federal courts ruled the ban on openly gay, lesbian, and bisexual service personnel unconstitutional. The military welcomes all, although President Donald Trump's policy is to throw transgender groups out of the military. That's Waco. The Branch Davidian site, nothing remains of the buildings other than a concrete foundation components, as the entire site was bulldozed 2 weeks after the end of the siege. The Waco siege prompted the FBI to reevaluate its tactics and procedures. The agency made several adjustments in response to the criticism it faced. There was a greater emphasis on crisis negotiation and peaceful resolutions, leading to the increase in training and the establishment of specialized negotiating teams. Well, that's October 7th, 2022, Gaza and Israel. In November 1995, the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by Yigal Amir, an Israeli who opposed the Oslo Accords on religious grounds. Rabin's murder was followed by a string of terrorist attacks by Hamas, which undermined support for the Labour Party in Israel's May 1996 elections. Israel's been at war with the Palestinians since October 7, 2023. Black Hawk Down. By early 1995, all UN forces withdrew from Somalia Fear of a repeat drove American reluctance to increase direct involvement in Somalia and other parts of Africa. It's commonly been referred to as the Somalia Syndrome. Black Hawk Down, a 2001 film based on a 1999 nonfiction book by journalist Mark Bowden about the crew of a Black Hawk helicopter that was shot down during the Battle of Mogadishu, was released. The movie won 2 Academy Awards for Best Film Editing and Best Sound at the 2002 Academy Awards. Well, Boris Yeltsin liked to drink a lot, but there is a legacy from him. He is largely credited with leading Russia through the dissolution of the Soviet Union and transition to a market economy, but his presidency also involved economic instability, corruption, and the decline in Russia's global standing. Life for ordinary Russians was terrible. Rampant inflation destroyed their lifetime savings, and food shortages were common. After Yeltsin resigned as president of Russia on December 31st, 1999, his protege, the guy he was grooming, a guy by the name of Vladimir Putin, became the acting president. Czechoslovakia is now Slovakia and the Czech Republic. On January 1st, 1993, the United States and other countries formally recognized both the Slovak and Czech Republic as separate sovereign states. Czech Republic and Slovakia remain close allies, although there are fissures that have opened up with immigration as a major concern. Immigrants getting into Slovakia from Syria and going into the Czech Republic. Escobar, he looks pretty happy in his mugshot, doesn't he? On December 1st, 1993, Escobar celebrated his 44th birthday, allegedly enjoying cake, wine, and marijuana. Next day, his hideout in Medellin was discovered. Colombian forces stormed the building. Escobar and a bodyguard managed to get to the roof. As a chase and gunfire ensued, Escobar was fatally shot. Some have speculated he took his own life. Soon afterwards, the Medellin cartel would collapse. He was a larger-than-life figure. He inspired numerous books, movies, and TV projects long after his death. Oh, Jurassic Park. In 2001, the American Film Institute named Jurassic Park the 35th most thrilling film of all time. In 2004, Empire judged Jurassic Park to be the 6th most influential film in the magazine's 15-year lifetime. Film Review in 2005 declared the film to be one of the 5 most important in the magazine's 55-year history. In 2018, Jurassic Park was selected to be preserved in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, which deemed it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. 2019, Mattel, remember Mattel? Mattel produced a new line of toys, including figures based on the film's character. Spielberg had a big year in 1993. His other movie was Schindler's List, and it won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture in 1994, the National Film Library of Congress and the National Film Registry decided they're going to keep it forever in 2004. Initially, Spielberg felt he couldn't direct the film emotionally, but changed his mind. He had acquired the film rights to Schindler's Ark in 1983. National Football League and Fox have had a 32-year relationship, or 32-season relationship. Fox becomes a lot stronger. They get stronger VHS stations in various markets that have been affiliated with CBS after landing the National Football League package. Cable penetration was not wide, which meant Fox got stations with stronger signals, while CBS ended up with weaker UHF stations. Also, 60 Minutes took a hit in ratings because it didn't have football as the lead in. National Football League annually is the highest number of the most watched TV shows in America. Michael Jordan changed his number to 45 when he came back. On March 19, 1995, Michael Jordan returned to the Chicago Bulls, putting out the news with just 2 words, "I'm back." He originally retired in 1993 with the claim he wanted to spend more time with his family. He played minor league baseball in 1994 with a Double-A Birmingham Barons franchise. He was a flop in baseball. He would win 3 more titles in Chicago. He's one of the greatest performers ever in basketball. The Mighty Ducks movement. Well, it was not the only new team, the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, or the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, in the United States in 1993. In sports, the Miami-based Florida Panthers hockey team also debuted. There were 2 new Major League Baseball franchises that hit the field for the first time: Miami, the Florida Marlins, and Denver, the Colorado Rockies. National Football League added its 32nd franchise to its group with Charlotte, North Carolina investors. That franchise would start playing in 1995. Monica Seles came back August 1995. She became a U.S. citizen in 1994. She made her tennis comeback by winning the Canadian Open. The next month, she lost the U.S. Open finals to Steffi Graf. In January 1996, she won her 4th Australian Open and final Grand Slam title. 2003, a foot injury forced Seles out of competition. She played only sporadically. She retired in 2008. Well, there's Oprah, there's Michael Jackson. For some reason, Oprah Winfrey stood out of the pack in the talk show genre. That included Jenny Jones, Rolanda Watts, Jerry Rivers, Geraldo Rivera, Sally Jesse Raphael, and Jerry Springer. She retired in 2011. As I have told you, those shows were staged. A lot of guests would pop up on different shows with different characters. Michael Jackson died in 2009. His legacy is at best mixed. He was one of the world's biggest stars, but to some people, he was a monster. He was accused of sexually abusing children. And that is what happened in 1993, and everybody in this room was around in 1993. And do you have any kids in 1993, or were the kids often gone by then? Any questions about 1993? It's your turn to talk.
Tell us something about
my background, what I was doing in 1993.